my first step ever podcast, and I am Ishani Nigam, your host and producer of the podcast. This podcast is made for all the disruptors around the globe who know that they are made for something, for that one thing, but fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection, the fear of fear itself holds us back at some point in time. But hey, those are the only milestones that if we cross, we are there to take our first steps. So, welcome on this journey with me where I interview people from across the globe so that they can share their story, their challenges, and you know that even you can surpass yours. Well, what are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome on my first step ever from all the parts of this world, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to this another episode where we're gonna discover another very interesting story of how did they take their brave first step into whatever they think the success looks like for them. So please join me in welcoming someone really special who started the passion project and now has made it into something so valuable for the industry that she's working for. Please join me in welcoming Gemma Clancy all the way from Australia. Hi, Gemma. Welcome on my first step ever.
Thanks, Ishani. It's great to be here.
And we are excited as well. Now, before I go forward and start asking those amazing questions that we have so that we can know a bit more about you and who Gemma is, I like to give a little background about you to our listeners today. Gemma is the co-founder and the head of marketing at Stella Startups, a marketing service specifically designed for early stage startups. So all you listeners who are into that field right now or even thinking of that, you are in for some good treats today. So keep your ears open for what's going to come next. She's also the co-founder and the head of growth at Overnight Success, a weekly newsletter with over 2,000 subscribers. Wow, that is a really good achievement because I think newsletter is something that I feel, personally, I used to feel, oh my God, I have signed up for another newsletter, but I have realized that nowadays there are specific newsletters that actually provide so much value and they're so specific and targeted and they just give you what you really need to know. So I'm really, really happy to see that Overnight Success is actually doing very well over here. So after, you have 2,000 subscribers and we are rooting for more, which is a growing resource for the Australian startup economy. Now, Gemma was born in Alice Springs, raised in Adelaide, and has lived in Hong Kong and Melbourne. Wow, that's a really good, I would say, background, very, very different backgrounds that you have. So we'll talk about that as well. And what did you pick up from these two different backgrounds? And she's a small town girl at heart, but loves to help incredible startups, no matter where they're born or what they do, tell their stories and make a positive impact. So welcome once again, Gemma, on my first step ever. And I want to go directly to the time when you were this little Gemma trying to, find sense of things in this world and yourself while you were growing up. How was that time for you? What was the mindset of the people that you were surrounded with, and how were things back then for you?
Yeah, great question. So growing up, I was very lucky to go to a really fantastic school and obviously be surrounded by a really loving family. And I think the primary thing that I remember being instilled in me from an early age is to put others first and also to kind of remember how privileged you are, that the gifts that you're given and to make the most of them. I think that is something that stayed with me right through adolescence and into adulthood, that, I'm really lucky to have the life that I do. I'm really lucky to have had the experience that I have had, that I've had a really great education and really supportive people around me. And you can often feel like guilty that, other people don't necessarily always have access to those same things. And certainly like my life's not perfect, but at the same time, it's important to focus on what you do have and make the most of it, because that, the worst thing you can do is to waste those privileges. So I think that's a primary thing for me. I think that was something that was instilled in me from a young age. And I think the other thing that's probably led me more to the career path that I'm on now is I've always had very much like an entrepreneurial kind of spirit. I think even as a little kid, my mum will tell you that I was starting up little businesses out the front of our house, like selling random things. I tried to start a dog wash more than once out the front of my parents'
Interesting.
house, just because I love dogs, and I was a 5-year-old, like, and
Wow.
trying to. And then my mum asked, well, like, how are you going to wash the dogs, Gemma? And I said, I guess I'll just use the shampoo and conditioner in the shower. Like, well, obviously. And she had to
What
explain to me,
else?
obviously, that wasn't a good idea. But yeah, no, I've always been really interested in, I've always been an ideas person. Like, always had a lot of ideas about how things can be done better, how you could start businesses that would solve problems. And yeah, and I think that's probably what's led me to end up working in the startup space now. So yeah, that's probably a couple of things from my childhood that still stay true to today.
That's incredible, Gemma. And also, I think one thing that I am really happy to know about, that you were so perspective and you were so observant and you were so aware of your environment. And as you speak of the privileges that you just mentioned, you were already aware of that at a very young and early age. So I'm a bit
Mm.
little interested to know about how did that come about to you. I mean,
Mm.
did a person impact you and influence you in a positive way to make you feel that way, or is it your own observation around that you were, because people who are listening to us today, we are all coming from all walks of life. We may be privileged with certain things and we might be looking forward to work towards certain things to make that perfect life that we always think about. So
Mhm.
this is a really great mindset that they can carry on, and I am really interested to know how did you derive that, so that people who are listening to us, they might find the inspiration to derive that for themselves as well.
I think my in my upbringing, I went to a private Catholic school, which kind of the combination of those two things means that I was surrounded by people with huge privilege, really greater privilege than me. Like, I didn't grow up in a family with a lot of money, but I never went without, to the extent of like not eating or not having shelter over my head. But and then I was in a school where you're surrounded by people who have a huge amount of privilege, but at the same time, you're being taught around principles of kind of Christian living. And I don't consider myself a religious. I think that the principles that are instilled in you, of most world religions, if anything, actually, are that you put others
True.
first. You remember, and you're grateful for the simple things in life, and to always be aware of who's around you and
Yes.
their needs first. So I think that that's probably something that's probably the combination of those two things being, I'd go to other people's houses and be like, wow, like, look at what they have, and also be aware that their lives weren't perfect. You might have lots of things, but you still don't have a perfect life. So it's actually important to be really grateful for what you do have, and it's not always the physical things, but it's the intangible things, the support that you have, from family and friends and things like that. Yeah, and so I think, yeah, it's a combination of those two things. And I think obviously my mum and dad are always people who have given more of themselves to other people than they've taken. So yeah, so that's
Lovely.
probably they've probably led by example on that front.
Yes, I think you have touched upon two very important things. The first thing is exposure, and exposure to
Mm,
different people and different places that makes you realize of your own, privileges, and also
mm,
helps you understand that being grateful is one aspect of your life, or one mindset that can always take you ahead in life. And I think the other thing that you
mm,
mentioned about was how your parents were always, at the forefront of giving, and
mm,
that is very, very beautiful. And only, I think, once you have that mindset of giving and a heart of giving, and open to other people and the ideas that they come from the different world, that really helps you grow as a person. And I think that's why you mentioned that you are a person of ideas and you always had that entrepreneur instinct and
mm,
everything. Before we come to the journey where you started off your own company and this amazing newsletter also that you run, we have a really interesting journey that we can see that you have taken, that you were in part of your life, you were in Hong Kong, and then there were you in Melbourne. How did that transition happen to Hong Kong? What was your time like over there, like, if you can take us through that?
yeah. Sure, sure. So yeah, so I went to Hong Kong as part of a Australian government scholarship program called the New Colombo Plan.
Fantastic.
That's yeah, I was really, really lucky to get that scholarship. It was in about I think the third year of the program, and that program still runs today, and it's offered to university students across Australia, and it gives you the opportunity to travel anywhere in the Indo-Pacific region. You can apply to go anywhere, like from Fiji to India to I went to Hong Kong, go Singapore. So they send, I think, around 80 to 100 students a year now, or at least
Wow.
they tried to during COVID. Obviously, they couldn't. But my year, I think there were about 60 people who went. And yeah, so you get the opportunity to go over there and study like a normal kind of study exchange, but then also spend time doing language training if you like, and then up to 6 months of an internship. Yeah, so I applied to go on exchange over there. If I'm really honest, I didn't actually want to go on exchange at all. I was very like, I'm a very home, oriented person. I wanted to be close to my family and friends. And I'd never actually thought that I would want to go on exchange. This program, because it was the early days of the program that wasn't super well known. Now it's a very competitive process, and it was competitive when I did it, but it's even more competitive now. The university gets to put forward a certain number of people. So they actually had someone from the university call me and say, Gemma, we think you should apply for this thing. We think you would get in just, based on your grades and things like that. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I think I don't really want to go on exchange. And if I was going to go on exchange, I probably want to go to Europe or something like, a bit easier than going
Yeah.
to somewhere in Asia. Anyway, of course, I went home and I told my family, and they were like, you're an absolute idiot. You should definitely apply. So that was good. Yeah. And so I went away, and I ended up being that I only intended to go for maybe like 6 months or like a little bit over the study exchange period. I thought I'll go do my semester of study and then maybe do a little internship and then go home, because I thought I'll be too homesick by then or just leave. So I went over and I did my study exchange, and then I really like was enjoying my time. Being in Hong Kong is an amazing city in that because it's so populated but so small. There were about 10 of us as Australian students all there on the same program at the same time. And we spent a lot of time together sharing our experience and kind of catching up at the end of work day and yeah, so I decided to stay. I stayed
Oh,
on to
wow.
do a internship at QB Insurance in their Asia Pacific head office there, and I spent some time in the HR team and the marketing team. Yeah, so I ended up staying until the end of the year. I also happened to end up getting very close to one particular person while I was there, who's now my husband. So that may have
Oh,
also been another reason why I decided to stay. But yeah, so we met. He was also on the same program, and
thanks to
so
your parents.
yeah, yeah. Well, they were just glad that I met an Australian. They were worried I was going to meet somebody for on exchange from Europe or the US or from Hong Kong, and then never come home again. But yeah, no, I met a Queenslander instead, and
Wow.
yeah, so we met there, and then I ended up coming home at the end of the year. But because I was in that relationship, I ended up actually going back again towards the end of the following year and spending some more time in Hong Kong while he was still there working. Yeah, so that was my time in Hong Kong. It was a really amazing experience, and honestly changed my kind of obviously my life trajectory and my career trajectory all at the same time. So yeah, pretty impactful.
Yes, I think that's why we say life throws surprises at you. I
Yeah.
mean, from you not wanting to, kind of go for an exchange to kind of just listening to your parents and kind of, taking that chance of, okay, let's just go and give it a go. And things just change for you. So I was actually interested to know, besides, meeting your husband on that journey, how has this experience of going to Hong Kong, or just say per se to a different country, shaped you in a way that is still helping you reap benefits even now as a person
Mm.
or even as a professional?
Yeah, yeah. I think obviously as a person, I was 20 years old when I went, so I was pretty young. So I've always been told I have an old head on young shoulders, but I think going overseas and living essentially on your own, away from family for a year, definitely helps you grow up pretty fast. So that was definitely a big element of it. But then I think while I was there as well, I was living in one of the most populated kind of fast moving cities
Yeah.
in the world. So
Of
it certainly opened my eyes up to kind of wow, like you see busy cities and things on the TV, and that's one thing, but to go and immerse yourself and live
very
in a city
different.
that's so different, really has a global outlook. Like Hong Kong is very well known being the center, very much a melting pot of a lot of different cultures and being very globally minded. Yeah, it opened my eyes to, I guess, how much of a small fish in a big pond I am. Like in Adelaide, as you know, it's easy to feel like a big fish in a small pond, which can be
Yeah.
good, but also can be bad because I guess, can close your eyes to like what else is out there in the world. So I think it definitely opened my eyes from that perspective, and I think it's good to it's very grounding when you realize how small you are. Like, it can be a little bit overwhelming, like, oh, what's the point? I'm so small. But at the same time, you can also go, well, I'm so small, I can do whatever I want. Like, it doesn't matter. I can. There are so many people out there. I don't need to change the world all on my own. I don't need to,
Yeah.
do the job of a million people. I just need to do what I'm good at. Yeah, that's it. So I think that from that perspective was really good. And I think finally, like, I mean, the purpose of the program was to open your eyes up to the amazing, connection that Australia has to the Indo-Pacific region and how unique that is. And I think it certainly did that. Like, now I've got friends who have obviously since come back from that experience, but traveled to countries all throughout the region. And now I'm surrounded by a community of people who all have really interesting insights into all those different countries, which you might not. I think a lot of Australians like undervalue that region, from a business perspective, maybe even from a travel perspective. But, often think, oh, if you've made it in the US or if you've made it in the UK, then that's where, if you can make it there, you can make
Yeah.
it anywhere. But there's a huge amount of business opportunity in the Indo-Pacific region as well. And it's really lovely people and really like interesting culture as well. So I highly encourage people to go and explore that for personal and professional reasons.
Can't agree more on that.
Mm,
Definitely, what you just ended up with is such an important aspect for people to think who do really come to Australia. It
mm,
is a great country in itself that you have number of opportunities if you see it from that way. But as well, like as you mentioned about your journey in Hong Kong and how it helped you in a way. And I think what's so amazing that you just mentioned something that about, you don't really have to, go on a battle and like change millions of life. You can just concentrate on your life, making it better. And in that, process, you eventually do help impact positively
mm.
impact other people, because only once you are happy, satisfied and content within yourself, enjoying what you're really doing, you can actually help and inspire other people. And I think that's what has happened in your case, if I see so.
Yeah, no,
And that,
that's true.
yeah, and that brings me to the two amazing journey that you are taking here in Australia. First one is Stella Startups. I would really like
Mm.
to know about how your experience in taking your first steps towards Stella Startup is, and also a little bit about overnight success.
I guess, we kind of like, I was in Hong Kong and then lived in Melbourne for about 4 years, and I was working in advertising agencies there. I thought that I wanted to work in advertising as like my long-term career. And I certainly like really enjoyed my time working in advertising. It's super creative. You get to work on lots of different businesses. I really kind of felt the need to get my hands dirty inside a business. Like, when you're working in a advertising agency, particularly for like, larger businesses or like government businesses, naturally there's an element of kind of being at a bit of an arm's length. The internal team is the one who kind of like is in the detail, whereas the agency kind of just comes in, does their job, and then usually kind of leaves the
Yeah.
rest of the team to it. So yeah, so I really felt that pull to kind of work in the startup space. So I ended up getting a job at a climate tech company, Trace. I was their second employee and their marketing lead. And I was there for a bit over a year. And again, yeah, really enjoyed my time there, like learned so much. And I think it was, it was a true early stage startup experience in every sense of the word, in terms of like, the business changed a lot while I was there, which was kind of like challenging but exciting at the same time. The team grew a lot while I was there, which again, like, it comes with all the challenges, and but is also like really amazing to see. And yeah, and then I kind of got to that was towards the end of last year that I decided that it was kind of time to move on from that role for various different reasons. Like I had actually reached a bit of a point of burnout personally, not necessarily because of that company, but just because of kind of various different things that had collided in my life at that time. And so, yeah, I decided just to take a step back. We're talking about take your first step forward, but at that time I felt the need to take a step back.
That's definitely a
um,
very important process, and we are happy that you're sharing that
yeah.
with us.
Yeah. So I took a step back and I was like, what do I want to do? I kind of was like, do I want to stay even in marketing? I'm not sure whether I feel like, this is the skill set that I want to, keep exploring. Do I want to do something completely different. Yeah, so I genuinely just took some time out. I did a lot of creative stuff. I did a woodworking course, like, did stuff with I was building like random bits of furniture and painting and things like that for a little while. And yeah, but then I guess in that time I still connected with people that I'd met through a program called the Media Fellowship run by Startmate earlier that year. And one of the people that I met during that program was Will Richards, who had started Overnight Success, the newsletter. Yeah, so I met Will through that process, and we kind of stayed chatting throughout the year. So he'd kept writing Overnight Success. He'd written about 20, 25 editions. By the time I said to him, hey, like, I actually have some free time, and like I'm kind of interested in just working on some creative projects, happy to help out with the newsletter if you need some help. And he was like super happy to have my help because he's trying to juggle that and a full-time job. So I initially came on board as like a kind of editor, and then started writing a bit more. And then I said, like, it would be really good if you were writing to more than like a few hundred people, because it's a lot of effort, like, to write to a small audience. Yeah, and he really welcomed my advice and support from like a growth perspective. So yeah, since then, kind of the rest is history, and we've kind of been working together since. And now I'm like officially a co-founder and kind of have my own real role in that business, which is really great. And I love working on Overnight Success because it's a really great way to kind of open doors in the startup ecosystem and have really authentic, genuine conversations with people, because we're not doing it primarily from like a commercial standpoint. The newsletter, was built out of Will wanting to learn about startup ecosystem. I joined because I wanted to keep learning and talking to people in the startup ecosystem, and it's continued kind of with that as the primary kind of drive. I'm trying to find ways that maybe we can, get paid for our time so that we can keep the newsletter being really sustainable and balance it with our, all of our other kind of demands on our life and our other work. Yeah, but our primary drive really is still to kind of support the startup ecosystem and just to really feel like we're actually contributing to it. So that's so that's Overnight Success, and we've got some really exciting things on the cards, I think, over the next 6 months that we're looking at working on. So that's really cool. So everyone keep an eye on what we're doing there. We just launched a new website, which is overnightsuccess.vc. So make sure you have a look at that, and subscribe while you're there if you're not already. So that's Overnight Success. And then Stellar Startups is kind of my newest venture. It is a marketing support service for early stage startups, and specifically designed with early stage startups in mind. And that came out of, I think, partly my experience working at Trace. It was an early stage startup, and I was the only marketing person there for a long time, or only marketing, person with a marketing background there for a long time. You can only do so much as one person. And you can also only do so much with the resources you have as an early stage startup. Like, you've got limited funding, if any funding in some cases. But at the same time, it's this kind of chicken and egg situation. You have no money to grow, or very limited money and resources to grow. But in order to, reach the next milestone, whether that's a funding milestone or kind of showing traction with customer acquisition, do marketing. So you have money to pay for marketing, but you need to do marketing to grow. So it's this constant unfortunate hamster wheel that a lot of founders find themselves in. And it's quite frustrating for me, as somebody who has those skills, to see people make quite simple mistakes or not be able to just do quite simple things with their marketing when it could really accelerate their business. The idea for Stellar Startups kind of came off the back of a colleague of mine, Bridget, who's now my business partner in Stellar, reaching out to me towards the end of last year. And we'd worked together in advertising, an agency called the Shannon Company before. And she was a copywriter, and she's like a generalist marketer, ex-journo. And she decided that she wanted to, stop being just a freelancer and kind of expand her services beyond just what she can offer, and think about how she can help people in a broader way. And so she reached out to me and she said, do you want to start an agency together? And I was like, I came out of advertising and I went, I don't know if I want to do that again. Agencies are, notoriously hard to work in, just because of the nature of the industry. We started talking, and I realized that we had that same we'd experienced the same problems when it comes to early stage startups, not having access to marketing support at a really affordable and accessible price point, and also not getting support in a broad enough to help them lay the really essential foundations that they need to do any kind of marketing activity. Like, if you're an early stage startup, often the advice you get is you need to do paid ads, or you need to do SEO, or you need to do PR. And often that's really well-intentioned advice. And maybe like sometimes it's very accurate advice that you do, sometimes PR can be really helpful. SEO is fantastic. Paid ads can do wonders for some businesses. But if somebody hears that advice and doesn't know much about the broad remit of things you can do with marketing, and also kind of all the trade-offs that come with choosing different channels and things like that, they might just go headfirst down into one real like specialist avenue and find maybe a specialist marketer or a specialist agency to help them. Again, those people might be really fantastic at what they do, but that channel might not be right for that business, or that business might not be ready to approach that, or they might not have really clarified who are
Mm.
we trying to serve, who are we trying to serve or talk to, what is our messaging, how do we craft that messaging for the different audiences we're talking to. And then they go headfirst down the strategy and they try paid ads, they try SEO, they try PR, whatever, but because they haven't got those foundations in place and nobody's helped them with those, or they haven't
Mm.
got a really solid strategy in place, they just dive headfirst and crash. So because they didn't get the foundations right. If you try to find people to help you with that, usually it ends up being an in-house person is often a good choice for that. But again, early stage startups don't often have the resources to bring in somebody in-house full time. Or maybe it's like a very senior advisor who's only got a limited amount of time to spend with you, or at a very expensive, hourly rate. So we wanted to kind of figure out, well, what's the solution there? How can we provide this generalist marketing advice, provide people with the foundations they need before they jump into specialist tactics? Yeah, get them ready to go down those specialist tactic paths after we've worked with them. So yes, that's what Stella does.
Yeah, I think you have just hit the nail on the head with this particular problem, solving that problem in the market, because that is really the chicken and the egg situation. Coming from, myself working in a early stage startup, I know what you're talking about. And being in the marketing side of the things, it can really get very difficult unless your brand is, you're very clear about who your brand is, who your target audience is, and how you want to approach things. So thank you so much, Gemma, for really taking us through your journey and helping us understand that why you do what you do, who you really are, what really motivates you. And it's lovely to see that you have taken the different actions and at the right time when it did need for you to make those decisions and take those actions. As you rightly mentioned, somewhere down the line in your story you felt the need to pause and take a step back and reflect, and from there you just kind of push yourself forward, and you've just come out to be such an incredible person doing what you really believe in and where your expertise lies, and you're also kind of pushing your boundaries and actually have created something so resourceful for people which they really are in need of. So thank you so much for being on my first step ever. And before we take your leave, I have a really quick question. If you could
Mm.
just give our listeners out there who are planning to kind of do their own thing, be do a startup, or they're in that early stage, are there any top 3 marketing related advice that you
Ooh.
have given us a lot, probably 3 that you can maybe share with us?
Marketing related advice. I mean, I think that, like I've alluded to, I think getting your foundations right is essential. So I think really clarifying what your brand's narrative is. And I think if you're not sure what a brand narrative is, I can link to some really interesting resources or podcasts to listen to. But it's essentially like, what do you do really, really clearly? Why do you do it? And why is it important? All wrapped up in kind of one story. And then that ladders down to kind of the specifics of your key messages that might change from audience to audience, but all kind of are cohesive back to that brand narrative. So I think that's probably my first piece of advice. Kind of tied to that, I guess the second one is that if you're wondering why maybe what you're doing or what your messaging is, whether your messaging is working or why your messaging is not working, I'd really think about kind of how you would explain it to somebody in a really casual setting, and like whether that's a family or family member or a friend, like at a barbecue or something like that. And you'll often find that you'll use kind of simpler language, but that actually kind of takes a lot of the jargon and kind of unnecessary fluff, salesy fluff out of it. And if you can do that, it also you can insert elements of kind of emotion and like pulling on the heartstrings to that. So I
Yeah.
think it's a worthwhile exercise to go through. And I think the final thing is that a lot of people end up doing a lot of marketing busy work, especially when it comes to content. And they'll say, like, what I mean is, like, they'll say that I know that I need to do content, and I've got a really long list of ideas of blogs that I want to write or posts that I want to do, and I just need to do it. And I would say that's like a little bit of a red flag sometimes for me, is that people feel like they've got a really long list of marketing things to do. And yes, there's always more you can be doing with marketing. It is a never ending list of things to do, like pretty much any other field. But if you find you've just got long lists of ideas or things to do, then I think that's usually a sign to step back and say, like, how can I prioritize these things? How do they ladder back to my business goals or and hopefully a marketing strategy? How can I prioritize them and just do what is the highest impact thing, rather than trying to do everything, and usually everything at a lower quality bar. That would be my third piece of advice.
Boom. Top three amazing, really effective advice. And I think everyone who's listening to us today and who are in that space, they really know what Gemma is talking about. So listen to her advice and let's get going. Let's take those few steps to get to your first steps today. And thank you so much, Gemma, for being on my first step ever. I always request our guest speakers to leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that they really resonate with.
My favorite quote that I heard recently was, if it's for you, it won't pass you. And I think that's really good for people who are feeling a little bit impatient, that they've been working really hard, or that, that they've got this amazing idea and other people seem to be doing something like that, or, that maybe they've beat them to it. And I think that if you're truly passionate about something, especially if you're truly passionate about solving a problem, or you've got an idea that you want to put out into the world, if you keep working at it and you truly are, genuinely trying to solve that problem, you will eventually get there. So that's my quote. If it's for you, it won't pass you.
This is such an incredible quote, and that definitely makes you feel really nice about things, just to keep you going on the track that you are. So keep taking that action. So thank you so much, Gemma, for being on my first step ever. And if you have loved what you've heard today and you want to follow more about Gemma and her amazing initiatives, company and startup, so I'll leave the link below in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on my first step ever. If you're still glued together on this episode, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And if you really want to hear more such stories from around the globe, then subscribe to my First Step Ever podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google, and Spotify, whichever platform you prefer. Please do give ratings and please do write your comments. And you can directly reach out to me on my First Step Ever _IN. That's my Instagram handle. A little about myself. I have always loved performing on stage, acting, speaking, and just emoting myself. So I use these mediums different ways so that I can connect with people, help them, empower them, infotain them, which is to inform them and entertain them. If you would like to collaborate for any opportunities, more than welcome to connect with me on my Instagram handle. Thank you.